Okay, so we just wrapped a crazy amount of coverage of the New York City Marathon, and our regularly scheduled show with me, Alex, and Caitlin is going to be on pause just for this week. But in place, don't worry, we've got something for you. And in place of that, I speak with author and Olympian Pete Pfitzinger, who literally wrote the book on how to run your best, smartest, and most successful marathon. That book is Advanced Marathoning. It's near and dear to my heart. It's the very first training manual I ever encountered for running a marathon, and it helped me run a slew of really good races. So I wanted to pick Pete's brain on how he went about building the training plans in that book, the philosophy behind the book, and also with this new edition, what he had to go in and change to update it for 2025. How it deals with super shoes, with the advent of technologies like hydrogels, and our understanding of how nutrition plays such an important factor in marathon running today. It's an incredible interview. We get right into it. We talk about how to execute a long run, the purpose of all the workouts, the overall philosophy of how it is he constructed the copious number of training plans that are in the book, and the incredible just sheer volume of great tips and knowledge that's stuffed into this book. Rereading this book was a total treat. If you've never read Advanced Marathoning, don't be intimidated by the title. I asked them about why they named it Advanced Marathoning. It's just basically, if you're listening to this podcast and you're curious about getting better, you should take a look at the book. It's great. And next week we'll be back with our usual programming. Alex, Caitlin, and I think we're going to do a mailbag episode. We've got dozens of questions from you. If you've got a question for us, email us at podcast@marathonhandbook.com, and we'll be sure to reply, and we'll also take on your questions in our, well, I was going to say quarterly mailbags, but it feels like we get so many questions that we're going to try to tackle more of your questions more regularly. So next week, we will take on your questions, a little bit of a off-season debrief after a huge fall of distance running, of marathon running, of majors. It's been a crazy 2025 so far. So that's coming up next week. All right. My conversation with Pete Pfitzinger. All right, Pete. Very first question for you off the top. I have to admit that when I first came upon this book many, many years ago, a book that I should say, kind of crazy to say this, it changed my life. It's kind of a heavy thing to say. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's a book that when I first saw it, I was intimidated and I didn't think the book was for me because it's got a big, weighty title to it, Advanced Marathoning. Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to first write this book. Let's get in the time machine, go back 20 something years to when you wrote the first edition of this book. Why the title and who this book is for?
Thanks, Michael. Well, Scott Douglas was the editor of Running Times back in those days when Running Times was for the more serious runner. And he had a relationship with human kinetics, and he had the opportunity to write a book that we did together called Road Racing for Serious Runners. And it was broad, 5K to the marathon and cross country and what have you. And then we thought, certainly my personal expertise is more the marathon. The marathon's the most popular distance. Let's do a book just for marathoners. Let's not do a book for beginners because there are a bunch of those. And let's go for that large, and it was pretty large then, but it's bigger now. Group of people, they've done a few, they're serious about it. They've maybe been, done well. Maybe they've had some issues and have essentially a training manual to help them to improve. So, here we are, I think 23 years later and on the fourth edition. I do agree the title is a little bit intimidating. And we're kind of stuck with it now. I mean, but it does sound like it's more advanced and for just the top 2 or 3%, whereas it isn't. It's not for the elite.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first read this book in the late 2000s, so things around, I encountered this book maybe 2008, I want to say. It's the second edition. I still have it here. I'm staring at it. It's on my table right now here. I showed it to you before we hit record.
Sure.
And it has a foreword by Ryan Hall. It takes me back. I get very nostalgic when I'm looking at it. But yeah, when I started to read it, it really connected with me. Now, at the time, I was a guy who had never run a marathon before, very curious about them. I'd done 5s and 10Ks and a couple of half marathons as well. And I knew that the marathon was the next logical step and a kind of a tantalizing project, a life project to take on. I think like a lot of people of all ability levels sort of approach the marathon in a similar way. But I didn't know where to start. And it's really hard to piece all this information together. Now, you were obviously an elite marathon runner in your day, but you're writing a book that is effectively for, I mean, I think an elite runner could use certainly the knowledge here, and the higher and the tougher training tables that you put together. But this book is effectively for very serious recreational runners. Is it a fair way to assess
it? Exactly. Yeah, well, that's we take those people seriously. They take the marathon. I talked about treating the marathon with respect. If you don't treat it with respect, that's pretty risky. And we've found over time that, the readers want to understand why. And I think we've gotten better over the 4 editions at targeting how we write the explanations, but also the training schedules themselves. Taking into account, well, people have full-time jobs. People, they have other things in their life. They're dedicating a period of time more so in preparing for the marathon. And how do we get that balance right? So they're getting the efforts in, but they've got enough recovery. We have 12 and 18-week training schedules. So how do we have that so we don't just beat them to death over 18 weeks, but they're getting better? So that's what we try to do.
So last January, 2 weeks before the Houston Half Marathon, my coach made me do what he called the impossible workout. 30 minutes at threshold pace, followed by 1 kilometer of kicking, even faster. All of it at half marathon pace, which for me is about 4:56 per mile.
You had to slide that one in there, didn't you, sir?
My point is that running on frozen roads near my house in Toronto to do this workout sounded daunting, and going to some gym and running on a regular treadmill sounded even worse. Luckily, Michael had a Wahoo Kicker Run treadmill stashed in his home in northern Toronto, and so I took advantage of that last winter.
So that's why you kept coming over to my house all the time.
I mean, I also came for the company.
Sure.
And mainly for the Kicker Run's run-free mode, where the treadmill uses sensors to adjust its carpet speed so that it can respond to your running speed in real time. So it responds to you, and not the other way around. Now that was helpful for the workout's kick portion, so I could accelerate naturally without having to worry about pressing buttons all the time. The treadmill also comes with the lateral tilt feature, which will simulate the angles of running on a natural terrain. So every step is not the same, which is a good thing. And it's kind of like if you're running outdoors. And bonus, the Kicker Run connects with a laundry list of third-party apps, including Strava, the Wahoo Run app, and Zwift, so you can run free in Watopia.
It's quiet, simple, and effective. The treadmill follows you and not the other way around. It's available in the US, the UK, Germany, and Austria. And now you can get a free Headwind smart fan worth $319 when you order the Kicker Run from Wahoo Fitness using the promo code MHRUN. That's all one word, MHRUN. Take our word for it, as well as the professional athletes that use it, including ultra runner David Roche, triathlete Chelsea Sodero, Olympic gold medalist Cole Hawker.
And now, me.
And for the month of November, use that promo code and you will get 25% off the Kicker Run. That's a massive savings. So go to the link in our description to get your 25% off and the Headwind fan for free. All right, back to the show. how would you describe the philosophy of advanced marathoning in terms of like your thinking when you're constructing this book? And obviously we're now working with the fourth edition, so we're now responding to the changes and the new information in sports science and super shoes, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But what's the overall philosophy of advanced marathoning for those who have never read this book before?
Well, it starts out with treat the marathon with respect. So it is, it's not shortcuts. It's, it's probably fairly serious in the reading if you're reading all of the chapters, but ideally not too jargon heavy. So Scott Douglas has been a writer, 30 years on running. He's outstanding at getting the level of explanations right. And what I used to have a monthly column in Running Times myself called the Pfitzinger Lab Report, and it was translating the science to, the I guess good recreational level runner. So that's treat the marathon with respect and prepare effectively. So the people reading the book, they don't have any extra time. They barely have enough time to do what they need to do. So we try to not have it too complex, not have too many extra things you have to do. So when we have supplementary exercises, say core strength, we put in, I think we have 6, and we don't go heavy on it, but you need some, and you're going to get a real benefit. But if there's 15 exercises and you never get around to doing it, that's not as good as if there's 6 and you understand it and you realize it's going to help you to maintain your running form through the marathon, and you're actually doing it. So, yeah, I guess that's the overarching philosophy, and trying to understand our readers. Who are these? I guess serious. I'll use the term recreational. It's not quite the right term. Marathon runners. They've done several. They want to improve, but they have limited time.
Yeah, focused on time, running personal bests, seeing that incremental, being willing to go through that incremental improvement. I remember sort of I'd say a few years into my marathon running journey, and an older running partner of mine in the group I was running with, who had been running much longer than me, said, you're going to see sort of diminishing returns soon. It's fun to do the big jumps and hack minutes off your time, but eventually you're going to get to seconds and maybe not running a personal best in every marathon, and then managing that and finding new ways to be motivated. One thing that I had forgotten about when I was reading the new 4th edition, which just came out, is that you spotlight both elite athletes for specific reasons. I'd love to talk about that in a second. But you also spotlight really everyday runners, just people who have used the book over the years and had success with it, and who have contacted you and shared their stories with you. What is the single biggest question you get from those who have read your book or are currently reading your book and following your plans? What's the question you've gotten over and over again over the last 20 years about this book?
It's really how to adjust the schedules for their specific circumstances. And unfortunately, I'm not a good enough correspondent, because someone will by email and send me a message and, what do I do tomorrow? Because I've got this thing at work. It's like, ooh,
yeah,
but yeah, it's I've been injured. I've got my marathons in 8 weeks. I was injured. I missed 2 weeks. What do I do? Those sorts of questions. And we actually talk about that in the book now. So Scott in particular has been really good at keeping track of those. So we have, okay, if this happens, here's what you could do. If this happens, here's what you could do. And using examples of what people have done. So yeah, that's probably the number one most frequent question.
Changes from edition to edition. I think sometimes when you see like a new edition, the cynical take would be, there's a couple of typos that got fixed and they want to publish a new edition to, charge more money or do a new print run or whatever. It
Yeah.
feels like between the third edition and the fourth edition, a lot has changed in running. I feel like a good comp for a different sport would be like when the NBA added the 3-point line, or in baseball when they changed the height of the pitcher's mound. It just sort of fundamentally alters the sport. And it feels like super shoes really fundamentally altered the sport. But there are also some other things that have changed in the last number of years as well. Has this been the biggest edition shift for you?
I think it has. Yeah, there are many changes. I mean, the way with each edition, I go through all the scientific literature related to running. And so, you scan 200 studies, you read 50 or 60 studies, you try and figure out what's relevant, because again, it's not for elite. It's not specifically, just someone who wants to run 205 or whatever. And so what's relevant to our readers, and some isn't. You read a lot of extra that isn't, and you don't want to go on and on about every possible new supplement that's not relevant. And very quickly, if you're writing a new edition, say every 7 years, things come and go. So you don't want to be, oh yeah, remember when that was all the rage, and nobody's ever heard of it anymore. So there's quite a lot. And sometimes it's just explaining things. So as an example, heart rate training zone. So we've always had our own recommended heart rate ranges for each of the types of training, and they're not exactly the same as zones 1 to 5. And so we've just explained that. And ours is from real data with real runners. And so, these are the typical ranges, with the caveat that nothing's ever right across everybody. So we explain that. There's a lot around nutrition. This is probably the biggest change. I mean, like, think about the first edition. It was, drink more fluid and eat more carbohydrates, and you could have done it very quickly. It was very simple. But now there's more information on the importance of protein for distance runners. And so we talk more about that. We talk more about getting protein in right after training. Caffeine changes each time. So now there's genotypes with your response to caffeine. So there's 3 genotypes. One, if you have one, you get a big boost from caffeine. If you have the middle one, you get a small boost. And if you have the third one, it's neutral or actually a little bit detrimental. So you still would need to go get that testing, but we didn't know that existed previously. Hydrogels are new. I think we mentioned it in the third edition, but it was brand new. We talk a bit more about that, and more generally around getting in more carbohydrate, say 50 to 60 grams per hour, which we definitely didn't talk about that specifically, in any of the previous editions. So that's another one. High fat, low carb diets.
Yep.
I'm not an advocate, but there are people who are doing that.
Yes.
And so in training, if you're going to do it, well, here's how you, and in racing, I wouldn't do it, but we explain that, we explain why. Doing some of your training carbohydrate depleted. So this is a thing that, elite marathon runners have done for a very long time. And if you're reading all the current information around carbohydrate, get carbohydrate, and you're always getting carbohydrate in, you wouldn't be depleting in training. And there is a physiological benefit of depleting, that you then store more glycogen. And so how much should you deplete in training? And how do you find that balance so you're not, dragging from being carbohydrate depleted all the time, but you're still getting it. So anyhow, I could go on and on and on, but there are many changes this time.
Yeah, for sure. And also, of course, it's updating the athletes that you're spotlighting. In this edition, for example, you mentioned, of course, Eliud Kipchoge. You talk specifically about his love of the process. And then, of course, Sifan Hassan, who is somebody who, as we're recording this, both her and Kipchoge have just decided, oh, we're going to run the New York City Marathon. Even though we just did the Sydney Marathon, 10 days ago from when we're recording this in September 10th. So we're put a little timestamp here, and she's a fascinating character because she sort of approaches things like projects, which I think is a really neat way of thinking. And I'd never really thought about this before, but you quote her in the capsule where you highlight her, where you talk about how she sort of sees running differently than I think a lot of people would. And these sort of details all collected together in this manual or Bible for how to approach the marathon, I think is really fruitful all in one place. Other things that I've noticed that I've made some notes here. Another really trendy training, I don't want to call it a fad because I think there's science that points to it being a valid thing, but double thresholds. You do not recommend double threshold workout blocks for marathon runners. Unpack for the uninitiated what a double threshold is and why it is that you just decided just going to stay away from it in advanced marathoning.
Yeah, I mean, and the caveat is that's for our readers. So, again, if you're Ed Eyestone and you're coaching Connor Mance, sure, it's probably great and exactly what is going to help them to get even better. But for our readers, again, who have limited time, limited energy, limited ability to recover, we're delighted that you get in one threshold workout and it's good and solid and it's done in that sort of right quality band. And so to try and do the 2 sessions in a day, that feels risky. So we just, we don't advocate for that. But, for the very elite, sure. And I've seen, videos of what they're doing out there in Utah as an example. And, it's hard. Wow. It's, it's amazing. And it's getting results. And it came initially out of Norway and it's all the rage. But I don't think it's for the 3-hour marathoner.
Yeah, no, I appreciate how advanced marathoning is really framed for the working stiff fundamentally, right? It's designed for people who are living a life where the marathon is a hobby would be diminishing it. I think it's a passion. It's a passion project, but it's definitely a project that you have to fit around your normal life, which usually entails an 8 or 9 hour a day job, often children or other familial responsibilities, and you're running really early in the morning, after work, or sneaking out at lunchtime to do your running. Other aspects of this book that I think are really neat are it describes, for example, when and how you should approach doubling to running twice a day, which is something that I remember when I started to approach that kind of weekly mileage milestone where I'm like, geez, it's getting tough for me to fit all this mileage in one run and make it make sense over the course of a week. And it's a very intimidating thing to figure out how and when to double, that sort of thing. What are some other kind of, I would describe them as like mysteries or enigmas in marathon running that you feel are really important for someone to take the next step?
Well, if I can go back to that one around the doubling, because that is interesting, where that point lies. And again, it depends on available time and your ability to recover. But in this edition, so we only have any doubles for the 70 plus mileage training schedules and the 85 mile plus training schedules. And one of the things I did this time was really go through each schedule with a fine tooth comb and took out anything that was holding back the ability to be ready for the next important session. And I found in the doubles, there were just doubles that were there to keep the mileage up. And if anything, they were making the runner, more tired for the next session. So I've taken some of that out of those schedules based on that balance point of, is this just keeping the mileage up, or is it helping recovery, or is it hindering recovery? And so that balance is a little bit different in this edition. And overall, I found a variety of places, and we would get this feedback from people using the book that, that week, I don't know, 7 weeks to go in such and such a schedule, that's really hard. And that flattened me. It's like, okay. So I went through everything and just trying to find where there'd be, say, 3 days in a row where it was too much. There weren't any cases when it was 3 hard days in a row, but it would be a hard day, a moderate day, a hard day, say. And we've stripped that back as well. So again, trying to enable the runner to be ready for the more important sessions. The mileage changes only slightly, like we might have reduced some weeks 3-4 miles here and there. But that's about it. So anyhow, that's a long-winded thing around doubles and, where that line is. Speed work or interval training. I mean, that's been the classic, because way back when, hey, I did 2400s, and that's my marathon training. And it's like, okay. Why? And, they'd be flat for 2-3 days afterwards. So, trying to just explain, the different training, different types of training. And so why lactate threshold training is important. Marathon pace training, which is very similar, is important. How tune-up races, fit into that. So there's a lot of that sort of discussion. And one thing that we have that a lot of the readers talk about a lot is the midweek medium long run. So that seems to connect with a lot of people. And that's, if you go back to Arthur Lydiard's book, I think might be Run to the Top, 1960 something. And there's a page there where he talks about doing 100 miles a week on one run a day. And I've got that book here somewhere. What were they doing? Well, yeah, they were basically doing an hour and a half twice in the middle of the week and doing the long run on the weekend. And that is essentially, I did a lot of that myself when I was doing big mileage. But if you think about it, if you're just doing your long run and then you don't have another longish run in there, you're providing that stimulus once a week. And so we try to find the balance. Well, you're providing the bigger stimulus once a week, but a pretty good one a second time a week. Mm-hmm. And over the course of, say a 12-week or an 18-week training schedule, that's different. Your body's going to adapt more. So I think that's another aspect. It's not just one long run a week that's helping you with that endurance.
It's funny. Yeah, I still to this day, I do on Tuesdays, I do my long run on Sunday. On Tuesdays, I go out, and throughout the course of the build, I'll go from 18K to 23K. I like to top out at about 23, 24K on a Tuesday. And I've always done that. It's a lovely hangover from your book, I imagine.
Right.
Now, let's talk about running economy, the mysterious running economy. It's mentioned in your book. We spoke with on our podcast, we did a live event in Boston in April, and we spoke with Dr. Andrew Jones, the Welsh
Yes,
exercise physiologist.
yes.
And we chatted with him about something called resilience, which he's trying to figure out now, which is kind of like taking running economy to the next level of thinking. But he did admit that running economy is still a very mysterious but very important aspect and piece of the puzzle of what makes a great distance runner. Describe to me how running economy is a factor in distance running for those who are listening who are not familiar with the term.
Okay. Well, I sort of have to talk about VO2 max,
By all
lactate
means.
threshold,
Yeah.
and running economy, because the three are all related in terms of marathon performance. But marathon runners tend to be able to, if you're well trained, to be able to run just a couple of percent slower than lactate threshold for the marathon. And that's about your body's ability to use oxygen. So it's aerob. You're running the marathon aerobically. Running economy is essentially how fast you can run for a given amount of oxygen. So let's say your lactate threshold is again, I'll have to use get a little bit technical, but let's say it's at 55 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram body weight per minute. But just think 55, right?
Okay.
So how fast does that let you go? So if you have good running economy, maybe that's letting you run at, say 5:30 a mile. And if you have less good running economy, that's letting you run at 5:50 a mile. And so that's where running economy, it's, how efficient, I'll say. It's not exactly efficiency. Physiologists don't like that. But how fast can you go for that amount of oxygen? So then the question is, in training, how can you improve your economy? It's also, how can you improve your lactate threshold? And then it's also, how do you maintain that during the marathon? Because if you're beat up, you're falling apart, you're struggling your running economy's been shot to hell as the race has progressed. And that's one of the things where super shoes are helpful. So with super shoes, you're getting less beat up during the race. So in the last 10K, your running economy is likely to be closer to what it is early in the race if you've got super shoes. If you don't, it's more likely to have decreased that much more.
Do you think everyone should be, at least everyone who's reading advanced marathoning, should be running in super shoes when they run their goal race?
Well, it's easy to say no to any everything question or everyone question.
Yeah.
But I think super shoes they're still kind of new. They're still I'd say they're specific to how you run. The best super shoe for someone, for a woman, for Sifan Hassan, if she's running 213, is probably different than somebody who's running 320. So what are the exact characteristics of the foam and the carbon plate and the rocker geometry for someone running at a faster speed versus a slower speed? And also the specifics of your running technique. I have in the back of my mind that Molly Huddle was tested wearing super shoes back when she was still at her best and had almost no benefit. Whereas other people have, say, a 4% benefit. So how you run is one aspect, and also the speed at which you run. Are you running, at the elite end, or are you running, 3 hours, 3.5 hours, even 4 hours? What model is best for you?
What do you think the number one thing is that the average reader of your book or would-be reader of your book makes a mistake with the marathon that you'd love for them to read the book and read this specific section so that they don't make that mistake in the marathon, so they have more success?
Ooh, it's a good.
There's a lot. There's a lot of different things, I imagine.
Yeah. I guess it's understand yourself, right? So I write this book, or Scott and I write it. There's some aspects I lead on. There's ones he leads on. He's the super shoe expert. So he's written, some really great articles for Runner's World on super shoes and what's coming next, and, the details of the foam, et cetera. But in writing a book, I shudder because I know there are going to be people for whom the generalizations that we make aren't exactly right. And that's why we try to not say it's for first timers. It's not for people running 5 hours. It's not for people running 2:06. It's a fairly broad group in the middle there. But heart rate training zones. Yes, that's for most of the people most of the time, and it's based on real data. But there will be people who say, that's not quite right for me. So to understand yourself, to learn, so to have a training log and not just the data coming in, but to reflect on how you felt, what's too much, what do I respond best to? So you learn over time. So, I mean, here in New Zealand, I've worked in sport performance across a broad range of sports, so not just running. And the same characteristics, the same factors lead to success again and again and again. And it's out learning the competition. It's learning something every time. And if you're an individual runner, you're an individual experiment. So, understand yourself, know more this time than you did last time.
I imagine, of course, you've had a lot of people contact you over the years, telling you that they've followed your plan, they've read the book. Have you ever had an elite runner reach out to you and say, I used your book at one point in my life, or I found this very useful? Is there ever anybody that surprised you in that regard that has used your book in the past?
Now I'm trying to remember. There have been Kenyan runners who've had,
Yeah,
they're trading, and there's a copy there that probably someone else left, and so I've had Kenyan runners say, "Oh, I've seen your book. I've read, through your book, seen the training schedules." But that makes me shudder too, because it's not, not that every Kenyan's an elite runner, but this would be a elite runner saying, "Oh, I'm reading your book. There's some of the training principles. Great. Yep. Read that. That's applicable, but not the training schedules." I've conversed with a lot of elite runners over time on a whole range of issues, not specifically of the book, but one that comes to mind was a very good runner who was getting ready for the New York Marathon, and he lived out in Colorado, and he was doing his long runs on trails, as it ends up, like the whole thing, right? He got to New York and he blew up, and this was before super shoes. And so, we came to the conclusion that he wasn't ready for 26 miles of New York road. He was really ready for 26 miles on trails. And so that was a good thing to learn. And now with super shoes, maybe he would have gotten away with it. But after that, he adjusted. So, his long runs might be half on trails, half on the roads.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing where it must be just such a painful thing to realize when you get to about 20 miles and you're like, my legs are killing me and I feel like toast because I'm not used to asphalt. Yeah, that's a real thing. in your in your training, in your book, you cover how long a long run should be. It's a question we get quite often. And it's a question that, fair enough. It's like with every other distance, you run the distance at some point, and it makes a lot of sense to run the distance. But with the marathon, obviously recovery is a huge factor in training, and running the 26.2, the 42.195 kilometers is probably a bad idea. But you do have 39K or 24 miles as the longest run once in some of
in some of the schedules. Yeah. And a small change this time too is we have ranges for or pretty much all the workouts for each day and then for each week to be a little bit less dictatorial. You must do exactly this on this day, and your weekly mileage must be this, because that's how people use the book. And so again, trying to accommodate real life. It's a good question. Scott and I discussed it, and with super shoes, maybe we would take a mile or two off, because maybe what was 26.2 miles is more like 23 miles in terms of the legs being beat up, and maybe you don't have to have done quite as much in training. So that's a good question. If there's ever a fifth edition, that might change a little bit. But yeah, to have one run for the big mileage runners of up to 24, we have included that. And for some people, that won't be the right thing. But boy, it's a good confidence booster. I did that 24 miler. It went pretty well. I know I can handle that distance as well as the time on the feet. I did a little bit of simulation of, taking in, say, carbs and fluid during it. So it was kind of real, a real dress rehearsal. So yeah, that's probably where we're different still, as we have been right along from some other books where there's often times in other books or other recommendations, do the minimal that you can get away with. We're not that.
Yeah, thinking about that now, it's a good point. I think about the experience of running a marathon, of being in situ, and once you 32 kilometers, the vice grip starts to tighten on your head and your legs start to feel like lead. And then by 35 or 6, you're still quite capable of talking yourself out of the race. But by 39K, you can see the window to the finish line, right? You're like, okay, I'm only a few K away. And I'm sure if you did like a meta-analysis of thousands of marathon performances, you'd probably see magically the vast majority of people are able to pick it up in the last 2 or 3 kilometers because they realize that they're home free. So maybe it's not a bad idea psychologically as well as physically to do a one prove it long run that gets you within proverbial eyesight of the finish line of a whole marathon without totally wrecking your body.
Yeah, that's our, again, the philosophy of the book: effective preparation, increasing the likelihood of a good outcome. And a good outcome is, maintaining pace or close to pace all the way to the finish. So if you've done, I guess I would say we have thorough preparation, you're leaving less to chance because you've been more thorough, tougher preparation. But at the finish line, you're more likely to be able to say, yeah, okay, I nailed that. I did what I hoped to do. And it'll be too much some of the time for some people. And again, I hope that people are listening to their bodies. They're not beating themselves up. I noticed in a previous podcast, you talked about non-functional overreaching, long, term. And um, that's, that was in preparing the book this time, that was where Scott and I had the greatest debate, because
Oh,
I got real deep into reading, understanding everything about short-term and non-functional overreaching, and talking about that more in the book. And Scott was like, "Well, why are you doing this, Pete?" Well, I was doing it because I could, and it was there, but it was beyond the book. And he was like, "Well, shouldn't you be talking about what to do if you feel yourself getting there? Because if you're doing the training schedules, our training schedules, ideally you're not getting there." And so,
yeah.
yeah, that was, I'm sure Scott was ripping his hair out, because, I got too far down that pathway. But for some people, the 24 miler is going to put them more into that. So, there's risk. Maybe they shouldn't do it. So understand yourself. If you do a long run like that and you're tired for 3 days, great. Yep, perfect. If you're flat for 2 weeks, that wasn't the right thing to do. So if you do have that, learn from it. Don't do it again.
Now, obviously, there's new science. There's research papers that come out seemingly every day. In fact, I looked at 2 different research papers on the marathon today alone, and it's great. There's a lot. It feels like even especially since the advent of the super shoes, the technology, there's something new to study, and there's also been a lot of advancement in terms of, as you mentioned before, nutrition and fueling strategies and that sort of thing. And we're in the midst of pretty crazy running boom right now, where a lot of younger people are really getting into the marathon specifically, but running overall. What sort of sports science and research have you seen since the last edition that really had you have to make significant changes or rethink some of the concepts that you were dealing with in the previous edition?
Um, I think the biggest changes that require good discussion in the book is around nutrition, because there's a lot to say when you're talking about protein. You're talking, there's all the talk of people with low carb, high fat. So what is that really in the context of marathon running, and what is that in training versus racing? The getting in carbohydrate at a higher rate during the race, so that's huge. And that's that's we hadn't talked about that. It always been, well, you could get up to an 8%, but even that would be risky depending upon your own personal situation. So you might be getting 6% in. And Greg McMillan was here about a week ago. We had a good chat, and we were talking about, we did the Arthur Lydiard tour. We spent a day where I drove him everywhere is related to Arthur. But
Cool.
I shared with him that, I never had even a sip of carbohydrate during a marathon, because we didn't back then. And so if you go back to the 1980s, probably towards the end, and maybe others were doing it and I wasn't, I don't know. But, we'd been, have a little bit of water and that was it. And then that was coming in. And so if I think about over the different additions, it was, yes, get in some carbohydrate, and here's what we know, and here's about gels and mixing, gels and drinks. But now it's, solid carbohydrate intake. More carbohydrate intake is going to be beneficial. So that's different. It needs to be explained, well, and people need to try it in training, try it in shorter races. And super shoes, again, all that context. So super shoes probably do change how long your long runs need to be. And that's, I'm not quite ready to say exactly what that is, but yeah, maybe you don't need to do quite as much. On the other hand, if you're doing your long runs or some of them in super shoes, you're not as beat up, and so you can handle the distance. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to think about. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded.
No.
Yeah.
Last question for you, Pete. You've now the 4th edition. It's done. It's published. It's available now. 5th edition, looking into the future. If you're somebody who works in high performance sports, you're paying attention to the sports science, you're looking outside of running as well, as you've mentioned. What do you think is on the horizon? What do you think might make it in the 5th edition that is uncertain? Now, you mentioned before about specifics of super shoes, and there are hyper responders, there are non-responders, and everything in between. And there's different tunings, different shoes that we just don't know anything about. And obviously there's been a lot that we've learned about carb intake and that sort of thing. What do you think is on the horizon for advanced marathoning? Let's say in the next 7 years or so. What are you curious about?
Yeah, aspects of recovery. So again, it comes down to the individual. And so how do you respond to training and how do you recover? And in this edition, we talk about heart rate variability. And there's all sorts of apps now. There's also, you can get heart rate variability measures, but the thing is, the more you know about heart rate variability, the more detailed and specific it is. And so I think we'll know more about how really to use that to optimize recovery. Whereas right now, if you're just using the app, 95% chance you don't know enough about it to really use it to adjust your training effectively. So some better understanding of individualized recovery.
We'll leave it at that. Pete Pfitzinger, you are the co-author, along with Scott Douglas, of Advanced Marathoning, which is now in its 4th edition. I will say this in closing. I was thinking about this in the shower this morning. I was like, I think Advanced Marathoning is on my Mount Rushmore of marathon training books. And Mount Rushmore is 4 heads, right? So you're one of the heads. And I would say Jack Daniels, the running formula is another one. The third one might be the lore of running, even though it's just a giant encyclopedia of ideas. I don't know what the 4th one is. I've been racking my brain about the 4th one. Do you have a 4th one you can share with us?
Well, 1960 something Arthur Lydiard Run to the Top.
There we go. Yes. Oh, that's good.
I'm humbled.
Where it all began.
I'm humbled to be in that group. Lore of Running's amazing. Actually, embarrassingly, it's holding up my monitor as I look over it. Jack Daniels, he was great for me. I mean, we used to have these training camps at Colorado Springs for top distance runners from the U.S., and Jack would invariably be there, and you learn so much from him. I mean, he taught me about lactate threshold and how to basically what was kind of a new concept in the early 80s. Oh, he was so advanced. He's been so generous with his time. So I'm humbled, and I'm sure Scott would be as well, to be in that group of 4.
There you go. That's the 4-pack. There's our closing recommendation. If you want to know everything you need to know about distance running and the marathon in particular, get those 4 books, read all 4 of them, especially Advanced Marathoning, which is in its 4th edition now. Pete Pfitzinger, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed it. It's great to be on Marathon Handbook.